It is here, it is alive, it is well. Welcome to the Give or Take podcast. I am your host, Danelis, and you might be wondering, Danelis, you said on your caption on Instagram that there was going to be guests. And I'm like, yes, but patience is a virtue. Let me tell you guys why we have this first episode coming out. I just wanted you guys to get to know me a little bit better, where the idea of this podcast even came from and how it came to be. And without further ado, let's just get into it. The podcast is what I named it, give or take. And I just bring in guests, either my friends or that'd be teachers or counselors at church or just sometimes strangers. So be on the lookout for that. There's so many exciting ideas that I'm going to plan out. I am so excited, and yeah, I bring in guests, and I have a subject matter. But the thing with that is that my guests don't know the subject matter. So whatever the reaction or viewpoint is, or whatever they're going to give to me or whatever they're going to expose to the public, it will be raw and authentic. It will not be practiced. I will not let them know. But yes, it's all about the realness of it, the rawness of it. And I want to my goal in my heart is at just sitting down honestly, because we have such busy lives and we create routines that become like the stress factor in our lives, and we never realize or we never think to just sit down. You know what I mean? And whether that be in your house or whether that be in, I don't know, a coffee shop, but in this case it's in a podcast sitting with me, and it's just us talking about random subjects. And and yeah, and you might say then as well, no, like, no, duh, like you will be sitting down with them. But listen, I will also bring my viewers into this journey. And you may ask, how? How is that even possible? Like, how are you going to bring us from like the phone to up here? Well, is that easy? Social media. I will be posting polls. I will be posting Instagram stories and just being active with you guys, listening to what you guys want to hear from me, listening to the content you guys want me to create for you guys, and we will all embark in this unfamiliar podcasting style, and this journey, give or take. A little bit more about the story is that I- I've gotten this question a million times. How did it occur to you? Like, nobody really thinks about this. Like, how in your 16-year-old mind did you come up with this? And I was like, it might seem random. The podcast might be a little random, but the idea wasn't. And I said, as I stated before, there's so much going on in the world, especially as a student, that you never, like, nobody ever thinks to just sit down. And that's a characteristic of my character. Um, I really like in-depth conversations. I don't like passive conversations. I like to have something meaningful and worth my time. And having that in this podcast is just amazing, because I've tried to do it in person. I've tried to do it with my relationships in life, but it's always like, oh, like, I got to get going, or like, oh, it's too late, because most of the good conversations, as you guys know, are in the nighttime. So to have this podcast is really a blessing. Um, and I love networking, but I hate going out. And don't get me wrong. Don't get me wrong. It isn't to say that I don't enjoy outings. Of course I do. But I am the type of person to get overstimulated very quickly, and which puts me in a very not so favorable mood. But but this podcast is what I call close networking, meaning that it's close, it's enclosed, and it's just the two. It's me and my guest. Um, and I love learning. I love growing as a person, and I love absorbing knowledge from people who have gone before me, people who have done this, even done this before, people who are heading towards the career that I want to go into. And there is no age range, you guys, in this podcast, not at all. I have, I probably will have 10-year-olds to like 75-year-olds. So there's not really a target audience. I know my business girlies are like, ugh, where is your target audience? I do not have one, you guys. This is why it's kind of random. And it's not because I'm disorganized. No. It's because there's a purpose to it, because I believe that everybody views life through their own lenses and through what their perspective of life is in itself. And to get a 10-year-old's perspective is way different to getting a 73-year-old's perspective. And what I figured, just to touch more base on the kids part, what I figured is that these kids are ruthless, man. Like, they're so blunt these days. Like, I used to be a little bit shy. Even though like I was outgoing, I was still a little bit shy. I was a little bit reserved. I didn't say everything that was on my mind. But these kids are just, they will tell you right off the bat. Like, for example, I have my little sister, and sometimes I just tell her like what's going on in my life. Like, this is just the most minimal problems you can think of in school. Like, for example, I might be stressing because an exam is coming up, or I have this tension between a friend or something like that. And she's just like my little sister, you guys. She would just be like, she'll pause. And remember, this is literally the point of this podcast, to pause and just speak your truth, speak what you believe in, or your viewpoints. And then she just says, stop stressing. Like, it's not going to matter in 5 years. And I'm like, y'all, I am shook, because that's literally, and this is the funny thing about kids, is that whatever you expose to them or whatever you show them, that's what they reflect back to you. And I told her a lot of times before, like, this is not going to matter in 5 years and blah, blah, blah. And then she says it in the moment. I'm like, wait, those are my own words. Like, ugh. Um, but yes, it's going to be wonderful. I also have 70-year-olds coming. Hopefully they accept my invitation. This is mostly because they've already experienced most of life's phases. They know what life throws at you, and I'm gonna pick at their brains. That's what I love doing. Um, and so then I love when people pour in their knowledge to me, when they give me advice, and I also like geeking out. So that's also another thing. I like geeking out. So there's going to be a lot of nerdy talks here, about science, about theology. We're going to get into that. And yeah, I am so excited to take you guys in this journey. And then moving along, we're just going to talk a little bit about the scheduling. So the scheduling works a little bit in the more simple side. I will have bi-weekly videos, meaning that there will be only two videos, two podcast recordings in a month. And since this podcast is a vivid reflection of your dearest host, moi, it will be bilingual. And you might be asking, I know you guys are asking, nobody's asking, um, why? And to that I answer, because just as there is, and you might be wondering, like, or she's a little weird after this, but I believe there's such thing as English knowledge and Spanish knowledge. I said it, you guys. I said it, you guys. That's just how my bilingual brain works. There's Spanish advice and there's English advice. There's nerdy talks in Spanish, there's nerdy talks in English. It's just two separate worlds that I live in and that I want to transmit to the media. Like, how awesome is that? You guys, I wasn't asked to be born Latina. You know what I mean? But this will also help me embrace every aspect of my life in this podcast. Obviously, there's certain things that I will keep to myself for privacy reasons. But yeah, like, I really want this podcast to be a reflection of who I am as a person, and for you guys to not be deceived. That's the last thing I want you guys to be. I'm not chasing fame. Most importantly, I'm honestly just sharing what I love to do, sharing my passion for other people and how I view them in my eyes and how I want you guys to view them as well, because I am friends with the most like absurdly talented creatures in this world. And even through this podcast, I hope to meet other amazing people, and just imagine how much amazingness is going to be in this podcast. Like, it's going to be totally mind-blowing. So a little bit more about the time and date and how that's going to work. It's going to be Saturdays, and I will drop at 12 p.m. You heard it. A podcast that drops weekends, not too early, not too late, noon. And that will be my release date and times. The duration of the podcast, I'm looking into having it from 10 to 30 minutes, 10 being the minimum, 30 being the maximum, just because I am limited as a student. I am limited by time. I am limited by my work, because I do work as of right now. And disclaimer, you guys, all of the equipment, this is a little mic that I'm using right now, all the equipment, all the quality, all the content that is being used is being made by a beginner. And this is just to say, I know that I'm going to get hate. I know that I'm going to be like, people are going to be like, girl, what are you speaking about? Like, and that is totally fine. That is totally fine. This, I'm going to keep on saying it, it's an insight to what my brain goes through, or what my brain has experienced up to this point. And I want you guys to be able to see that through this podcast. And not mattering the quality, not mattering the content, obviously the content, yes, what I'm putting out there, but more about the equipment, and just listening. That's it. Taking that time to pause and just seeing, hey, what is this 16-year-old girl doing? Like, nobody's doing it like her. So yes, that's just a quick disclaimer that I wanted to make. A little bit of more about me. You might be saying, girl, why'd you leave the get to know me for last? Because it's a random podcast. There's obviously certain structure to it, but it's random, because that's just how I am. um as I was saying, I am 16-year-old turning 17, and I am learning as I am going, you guys. I am human. I am bound to get tired. I am bound to take media breaks, but remember that this all started with a vision, and through it I will continue with a vision. And there's so much communication that has been lost due to several factors, due to the influence of technology, due to the influence of viruses like COVID. It's taken a lot of away from the human experience and what it means to communicate. And that's why I this was original vision, to restore that, to make that new, to not rebrand it actually, because the way that we communicate, the way that my generation communicates, in comparison to, I don't know, my mom's generation, I'm not sure what generation they are. It's totally different. And that's not saying it's a bad thing. It's just saying that let's embrace it, you guys. Let's actually use what we have, because there's so many talents hidden, but we don't know how to communicate that. And now that we're in the subject, um, communicating, I am from El Salvador, but I moved to the U.S. here in Houston, Texas. Specifically in the elite suburb. I have gone back to visit my grandparents. I'm so blessed with my family, you guys. I have a family that is hardworking, that it loves God, that pursues God, and I'm just so grateful for them, you guys. And a fun fact for you guys is that I am a dual credit student and dun, 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 a full time Christian. Yes, you heard it here. This just goes to show that all the viewpoints, all the discussions, it will always reference back to the Bible, because that is my biggest source of knowledge. Yes, I am saying that I am going to bring 7-year-olds. Yes, I'm saying that going to bring 10-year-olds, but it will always, my viewpoint, my perspective, my discussion will always derive from what I've learned and what I've seen in my life, the miracles that God has performed in my life. I will always go back to that, to the biggest source of knowledge and the biggest source of unity in this world. Um, and I'm making you guys aware of this because you might not be comfortable with it, and that's fine. That's totally fine. But just look at it as a teenager's experience and a teenager's life as a Christian, as a podcaster, as a dual credit student, and the list goes on. And but just look at it like that. And I'm not saying to admire me, because I don't want to put myself in that position. But I am saying to start questioning your communication, start questioning how you talk and how you influence people, because it does matter. Um, and I've seen it in the recent years. I've seen it ever since I was growing up, honestly. But moving besides the point, that's literally besides the point. Going back to the fun facts, I actually actively serve at my local church. It is the Iglesia de Dios Osana, woo woo, with the sound system, as the youth group secretary and the part-time singer. You heard it, you guys. You guys heard it here first. I am a part-time singer. Ah. Um, but yes, I have been a part-time singer ever since I was 4, so that's not really a surprise. But yes, I am a part-time singer. If you guys want me to sing, that's not happening. Sorry to get your hopes up, but that's not happening. I love just to close this off, to close this episode off. I just want to leave you guys with 2 things. First, being that I want you guys to have the main takeaway from this whole episode is that I love picking knowledgeable brains and absorbing wisdom, even though I just made a weird, vivid description inside your head. That's the point of this podcast, to absorb knowledge, and in my short-lived life, to give knowledge and absorb everything. Absorb the experience that I have with each individual guest, absorb every personality that comes to this podcast, and overall, just as I stated before, go back to the human experience, go back to the human condition. And that's my biggest desire. I hope you guys loved this podcast episode. This will be it. And yeah, I did it. This is my first podcast episode. And I will see you guys the Saturday after this Saturday, upcoming Saturday.